The voice came from beneath 12 inches of ice, and only the dog believed it was real. Snow moved sideways across Eagle River, Wisconsin, swallowing the shoreline, the rescue trucks, and the dark shapes of volunteers searching beneath white floodlights. The temperature had fallen to 9 degrees, cold enough to turn every breath into smoke and make the frozen river groan like an old house settling in the night. Staff Sergeant Ice.A. Brooks stood near the bank with one gloved hand wrapped around Ghost's lead. At 38, Ice.A. still carried the unmistakable posture of a United States Marine, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark skin silvered by wind-blown frost, his calm face giving nothing away. But his eyes never left the ice. Neither did Ghost's. The white German shepherd stood almost invisible against the snow, 6 years old, lean and powerful, with amber eyes that seemed to hold their own light. He had searched collapsed buildings, empty fields, and miles of forest without losing focus. He had never ignored Ice.A.'s command. Not once. Until that night. Ghost heel. The K-9 did not move. His ears turned toward the center of the river. His nose lifted, but he was not testing the wind. He was listening. Somewhere behind them, Sheriff Claire Bennett called for the volunteers to pull back. The storm was thickening. Visibility had dropped below 50 yards, and the ice near the northern bend had begun to shift under the weight of fresh snow. 11-year-old Ava Collins had been missing since the previous evening. Search teams had found her red mitten near the river, but no tracks, no broken ice, and no sign that she had ever stepped onto the frozen surface. Most believed the mitten had been carried there by the wind. Ghost had spent the last 20 minutes proving them wrong. He walked forward 3 careful steps, stopped, and lowered his head until one ear rested against the ice. Ice.A. tightened the lead. Easy boy. Ghost became perfectly still. The snow gathered across his white back. His breath slowed. Then his eyes lifted toward Ice.A. There was no panic in them. Only certainty. Ice.A. knew that look. It was the same look Ghost gave before finding a hidden person during training. The same silent message that had guided frightened people out of places where human senses failed. I found something. Deputy Mark Dalton approached from behind, boots scraping across the frozen snow. Sergeant, we need to clear the river. Sheriff's orders. Ice.A. raised a hand without looking back. Wait. Dalton listened. Nothing came through the wind except the distant hum of a generator and the soft crackle of ice under falling snow. There's nothing out there, he said. Ghost's right ear twitched. A faint sound rose beneath them. 3 soft taps. Slow. Uneven. Ice.A. felt the cold settle somewhere deeper than his coat could reach. Did you hear that? Dalton shook his head. Ghost stepped forward again. The lead pulled tight. Ice.A. followed, each boot placed carefully, his weight low, his attention fixed on the pale surface beneath them. 30 feet from shore, Ghost stopped beside a smooth circle where the snow refused to settle. Dark water moved beneath the ice like a shadow behind glass. The dog lowered his muzzle and released a quiet whine. It was not fear. It was recognition. Ghost, Ice.A. whispered. The K-9 pressed one paw to the circle. Another sound drifted upward. This time it was not a tap. It was a voice. Thin, distant, almost lost beneath the shifting ice. Ghost. Ice.A. froze. The word was so faint he could have mistaken it for wind, but the dog had heard it clearly. His head snapped toward the sound. Every muscle tightened beneath his white coat. Dalton stared at Ice.A. How would she know his name? Ice.A. had no answer. Ava had never met Ghost. No one in the Collins family knew Ice.A. was coming to help. Yet the voice beneath the river had called the dog as if she had been waiting for him. The ice gave a long, low moan. A dark line appeared near Ghost's front paws and spread outward like a crack across old porcelain. Back, Ice.A. ordered. Ghost did not obey. The voice came again, weaker now. Please. Ghost pulled once. Ice.A. held firm. Ghost, stay. The dog looked back at him, snow clinging to his lashes, amber eyes steady in the storm. For one suspended second, neither moved. Then a section of ice. Ahead of them dipped beneath the weight of rushing water. Ghost twisted free of the loosened lead, raced across the white surface, and jumped into the black opening without hesitation. Ghost! Ice.A. ran after him as the river swallowed the dog's white body. For a heartbeat, nothing remained but rippling darkness and the empty lead sliding across the ice. Then, from somewhere below, Ghost barked once. Not in fear, in command. And beneath that bark, Ice.A heard the child's voice one final time. There's someone else with me. 18 hours earlier, Eagle River still looked like a town wrapped for Christmas. Warm lights glowed behind cafe windows, pine garlands hung across Main Street, and children carried paper cups of hot chocolate through the early evening snow. The river beyond the town square lay flat and white beneath a pale moon, quiet enough to appear harmless. Ava Collins had left the winter festival shortly after 7 o'clock. She was 11 years old, small for her age, with chestnut hair tucked beneath a red knit cap and a habit of noticing things adults passed without seeing. Her mother, Rachel, believed Ava had gone to the church hall with friends. Her friends believed she had walked home. By 8:15, both assumptions had become fear. Sheriff Claire Bennett organized the first search before the snow could erase the streets. Volunteers checked alleys, playgrounds, stores, and the narrow trail behind the old church. They called Ava's name until their voices grew rough in the cold. No one heard an answer. At 9:40, a volunteer found Ava's bicycle leaning against the rear fence of the church property. The front wheel was turned sharply toward the river. Her backpack was still hooked over the handlebars, but the small red mitten she always wore was gone. Claire studied the snow around the bicycle. There were several footprints, blurred by wind and passing boots, but one narrow trail led north toward a line of bare cottonwood trees. It ended beside a low wall of drifted snow. Beyond that wall, the ground appeared untouched. She did not disappear, Claire said quietly. We just lost the trail. 20 miles away, Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks was driving through the storm with Ghost resting in the back of his truck. Isaiah had not planned to stop in Eagle River. He was traveling to the small house his mother had left him outside town, a place he had avoided for nearly 6 years. The truck heater worked in uneven bursts, and an old gospel station faded in and out between weather reports. Every few minutes, Ghost lifted his head and watched Isaiah through the rearview mirror. The white German shepherd knew the difference between silence and sorrow. Isaiah had learned that long ago. Near the county line, emergency lights reflected across the falling snow. Claire stood beside the road, directing traffic around the search command post. She recognized the military license plate and the K9 transport markings on Isaiah's truck. When she approached, Ghost was already sitting upright. You with a unit? She asked. United States Marine Corps, Isaiah replied. I train working dogs. Claire glanced toward the river, then back at Ghost. We have a missing child. Isaiah did not ask how long she had been gone. The faces of the volunteers answered that. Within minutes, Ghost was wearing his search harness. Rachel Collins knelt in the snow and handed Isaiah Ava's blue scarf. Her fingers shook as she held it. She wore this yesterday, Rachel said. She sleeps with it when she gets scared. Isaiah let Ghost take the scent. The dog inhaled once, then again. His amber eyes changed. He turned toward the church, ignoring the river completely. The search team followed him across the square, past the bicycle, and through the line of cottonwoods. Ghost moved with calm purpose until he reached the wall of drifted snow where the footprints had vanished. He stopped. Isaiah expected him to circle back. Instead, Ghost pushed his muzzle into the drift and began digging. Beneath 4 inches of powder lay a narrow opening between 2 maintenance sheds. Ava had not climbed over the snowbank. She had gone through it. The passage led to an abandoned service road hidden from the searchlights. Fresh tracks appeared on the other side, small boots moving north. Beside them were larger prints from an adult shoe. Deputy Mark Dalton aimed his flashlight down the road. Someone was with her. Ghost followed both sets of tracks for nearly half a mile. The wind carried the scent of frozen cedar, chimney smoke, and distant river water. At the edge of an overgrown property, the tracks ended beside a weathered cabin with one dim light burning inside. A thin man stood behind the window, watching them approach. His name was Henry Wallace. He was 67, a retired emergency medic who had lived alone since his wife died. Claire knocked while Isaiah held Ghost near the porch. Henry opened the door slowly. His coat was wet at the shoulders. Mud darkened the knees of his work pants, and in one hand he held a child's yellow flashlight. Dalton reached for it. Where did you get that? Henry looked past him toward the river. The girl dropped it. Claire stepped closer. Where is Ava? Henry's face tightened, not with guilt, but with the helplessness of a man carrying news no one wanted to hear. She came here before the snow got heavy, he said. She asked if I had heard it too. Isaiah watched Ghost. The dog did not growl. He sat directly in front of Henry and waited. Heard what? Isaiah asked. Henry opened his hand. Resting in his palm was Ava's missing red mitten, wet around the fingertips and stiff with ice. A child, he whispered, crying beneath the river. For several seconds, no one inside Henry Wallace's cabin moved. The wind pressed against the walls, and the old window glass trembled softly in its frame. Ghost remained seated near Henry's boots, his white coat damp with snow, his amber eyes fixed on the retired medic with a calm that made Deputy Mark Dalton more uneasy than a growl would have. Claire took the red mitten from Henry's hand and held it beneath the light. The wool was wet. Tiny crystals of ice clung to the fingertips. Start at the beginning, she said. Henry looked toward the narrow hallway behind him, then stepped aside. You should come in. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke, black coffee, and old paper. A cast iron stove warmed one corner, but the room still carried the cold of a place where only one person lived. Shelves lined the walls, filled with medical books, weather, journals, and boxes labeled by year. On the table stood 2 bowls. One held soup that had gone untouched. The other was small, decorated with faded blue flowers, the kind a child might choose from a thrift store. Rachel noticed it immediately. Ava ate here? Henry nodded. Sometimes. Dalton turned toward him. You never mentioned knowing her. No one asked before tonight. His answer was quiet, but it landed hard. Rachel's face tightened. Isaiah watched Ghost instead. The dog moved past Henry and sniffed the edge of the table. He found no fear there, no alarm, only a familiar scent. Ava had been inside this room many times. Henry opened a kitchen drawer and removed a stack of folded papers tied with twine. They were drawings. In one, a crooked cabin sat beneath tall pine trees. In another, a gray-haired man held a steaming cup while a girl in a red hat fed birds beside the porch. Near the bottom of the stack was a picture of Ghost, though Ava had never met him. The dog was drawn in white crayon against a dark blue river. Where did she see this dog? Isaiah asked. Henry looked at the picture, then at Ghost. She did not. She said she dreamed about him. Dalton gave a skeptical breath. Convenient. Ghost turned his head toward him, then looked back at Henry. Henry did not defend himself. He walked to a wooden cabinet and brought out a small handheld recorder. The plastic casing was scratched, and a strip of masking tape across the back carried Ava's name in blue marker. She liked collecting sounds, Henry said. Wind through the reeds. Train whistles. Owls near the marsh. She said people forget how much the world says when no one is talking. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth. That sounded exactly like her daughter. Claire took the recorder. When was she here last? Yesterday afternoon. A little before 5. Why? She heard crying near the river the night before. She came to ask whether I had heard it too. Henry lowered his eyes. I told her it was probably ice shifting beneath the current. I told her not to go near the water. But she did, Isaiah said. Henry nodded once. After the festival, I saw her bicycle behind the church. I followed her. Tracks as far as the service road. Then the snow covered them. Dalton stepped closer. You found her mitten. Near the north bend. On top of the ice. And you did not call anyone. Henry looked toward the window. Shame passed across his face like a shadow. My telephone line went down in the storm. I tried to reach the highway, but I slipped near the bank and lost my flashlight. By the time I returned, search vehicles were already in town. Claire studied the wet shoulders of his coat and the mud on his knees. His story matched what they saw, but suspicion had already entered the room, and suspicion rarely left quietly. Why did you bring the mitten home? Rachel asked. Henry's voice softened. Because I thought it was the only part of her I could save. Ghost rose and walked to him. The dog pressed his nose against Henry's hand, then lay down across the man's boots. Isaiah felt the room change. Ghost had worked around frightened witnesses, confused survivors, and people hiding the truth. He did not offer trust easily. He believes you, Isaiah said. Dalton shook his head. He is a dog. That is why I trust the answer. Claire pressed the recorder's play button. Static filled the cabin. Then came Ava's voice, bright and close, recorded earlier that week. She whispered about the wind, the snow, and a sound traveling beneath the frozen river. A second voice followed, so faint that everyone leaned closer. It was not clear enough to understand. Henry pointed toward the speaker. Listen again. Claire replayed it. This time, beneath the hiss of wind, a child seemed to call from far away. Ava's voice returned at the end, no longer playful. She sounded afraid, but determined. Mr. Wallace, I think someone is crying under the river. The recording clicked off. Before anyone could speak, Ghost lifted his head. From outside the cabin, beyond the trees, 3 slow knocks echoed through the frozen night. Ghost reached the cabin door before anyone else. His ears stood high, his body angled toward the darkness beyond the porch. The sound came again. 3 slow knocks, separated by several seconds of silence. Ice.A opened the door, and the storm rushed inside with the smell of pine, snow, and frozen water. Ghost moved into the night without waiting for a command. Ice.A caught the handle of his harness as the others followed. Where does that path lead? Claire asked. Henry pulled on his coat. North Bend. There is an old access road near the river. The group crossed the yard beneath swaying branches, their flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the snowfall. Ghost kept his nose low, but he was not following Ava's scent now. He stopped whenever the sound faded, waited, then changed direction when it returned. The knocks seemed to travel beneath the ground. Sometimes they came from the left, sometimes from ahead. The river was carrying them under the ice. Ice.A could feel each faint vibration through the soles of his boots. It awakened a memory he had spent 22 years trying to bury. He was 16 again, standing beside a frozen pond outside Milwaukee while his younger brother, Caleb, struck the underside of the ice with one small fist. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Ice.A had heard him. He had simply been too afraid to move. Ghost looked back at him as if sensing the change in his breathing. Ice.A placed one hand between the dog's shoulders. Keep going. At the edge of the trees, the land dropped toward the river. Searchlights glowed through the snow nearly half a mile downstream, but this section remained dark. Henry pointed toward a row of wooden posts almost buried beneath the drifts. There used to be a boat landing here. Ghost pulled toward the center of the river. Dalton stepped in front of him. The ice has not been checked. Claire studied the white surface. We use safety lines from this point forward. Volunteers arrived with ropes, flotation suits, and long poles. Ice.A clipped one line to Ghost's harness and another to his own belt. They moved onto the river slowly. The ice answered their weight with low, distant groans. 40 feet from shore, Ghost stopped above a long shadow beneath the frozen surface. Snow had covered its outline, but under the floodlights, a shape emerged. It was the roof of a pickup truck. Vehicle under the ice, Dalton called. The rescue team spread out. Rachel stood on the bank with both hands pressed against her chest. Ava could be inside. Ghost circled the shadow, whining softly. Ice.A knelt and brushed snow from the ice. Through the cloudy surface, he saw a dark cab tilted against the current. One window appeared open. A strip of yellow fabric moved inside. We need an access hole, Claire said. The team worked carefully, cutting through the ice several feet from the vehicle. Every sound seemed too loud. Metal scraped. Water rose black and cold through the opening. Ice.A secured his line, lowered himself onto a rescue ladder, and entered the river. The cold closed around him instantly, stealing the air from his lungs. He forced himself to breathe slowly. Ghost remained above, staring through the ice. Ice.A followed the rope toward the truck, guided by a rescuer on the surface. The cab was empty. No child waited inside. On the passenger seat lay a folded blanket, a pair of small winter boots, and Ava's cellular telephone sealed inside a clear plastic pouch. Ice.A carried the items back to the opening. Rachel recognized the boots, but she shook her head through tears. Those are not hers. They are too small. Claire dried the telephone inside the rescue truck and powered it on. The screen flickered. One video had been recorded shortly before Ava disappeared. Claire pressed play. Ava's face appeared beneath the glow of a street lamp, snow resting on her red cap. Henry stood several feet behind her near the riverbank. I can still hear him, Ava whispered. Mr. Wallace says the sound is moving downstream. The camera turned toward the frozen river. For several seconds, there was only wind. Then a child's voice rose faintly from the darkness. Help me. Ava lowered the telephone. There is a little boy out there. The recording shook as she began moving toward the ice. Henry called after her, telling her to stop. The screen went dark. No one spoke. The truck beneath the river had not carried Ava. It had carried someone else. Ghost suddenly struck the ice once with his paw, then turned upstream, away from the searchlights. From beneath the frozen surface came 3 more knocks, weaker than before, followed by a voice that barely reached them. Ava. The voice beneath the ice did not sound like Ava. It was younger, softer, and so distant that the wind nearly carried it away before anyone understood what it had said. Ghost understood. The white German shepherd turned upstream and pulled against the safety line with quiet urgency. Ice.A followed, boots sliding over the frozen surface as the rescue lights faded behind them. Hold the line steady, he called. The volunteers moved along the bank, feeding out rope, while Sheriff Claire Bennett directed 2 rescue workers to bring another ladder. Deputy Mark Dalton stayed close to Ice.A, but his eyes kept returning to the dark shape of the pickup beneath the ice. The voice came from the truck, he said. No, Ice.A answered. The current carried it past the truck. Henry Wallace stood near the shoreline, one hand braced against a wooden post. He looked exhausted, but he pointed farther north. There is an old drainage channel beyond the bend. It was sealed years ago. Claire turned toward him. Could someone get inside it? Not from the shore. Henry watched Ghost advance through the snow. But the river might have opened another way. The storm thickened until the trees became pale shadows. Ghost traveled almost 200 feet upstream, then stopped in the center of a wide circle where the snow had melted into a thin silver glaze. No one had walked there. No branch hung above it. Yet the surface remained clear while snow gathered everywhere else. Ghost lowered his head and placed one ear against the ice. Ice.A crouched beside him. Beneath the frozen river came a dull sound. One tap. A pause. 2 more. Ice.A closed his eyes. For a moment, Eagle River disappeared. He was back beside the pond outside Milwaukee, 16 years old, hearing Caleb knock from underneath the ice. His younger brother had known Ice.A was standing above him. Caleb had trusted him to move. Ice.A had remained frozen by fear until an adult pulled him away from the cracking edge. Years of Marine training had taught Ice.A how to enter burning buildings, cross unstable ground, and guide frightened people through darkness. None of it had silenced those. 3 small knocks. Ghost pressed his shoulder against Ice.A's arm. The contact was gentle, but it brought him back to the river. I am here, Ice.A whispered, though he did not know whether he was speaking to Ghost, Ava, or the boy from his memory. Another tap rose beneath them. Ghost stood and began brushing snow from the clear circle with both front paws. He worked carefully, stopping every few seconds to listen. Ice.A swept away the loosened powder with his gloves. The ice beneath was darker than the surrounding surface. Water moved below it in slow black ribbons. Dalton knelt several feet away and placed his hand flat against the ice. I feel something. Claire called for silence. The generators were lowered. The volunteers stopped moving. Even the ropes became still. The river groaned once, deep beneath the current, then settled. A child's breath reached them through the ice. It was followed by a whisper. Ghost. Rachel Collins made a broken sound from the bank. That is Ava. Ice.A looked at Henry. How does she know his name? Henry shook his head. His face had gone pale. She drew him before he came. Ghost lifted his muzzle and stared at the ice. His amber eyes held no confusion. He accepted the voice as if he had been expecting it all along. Claire moved closer, keeping her weight low. Ava, can you hear us? No answer came. Ice.A struck the ice gently with the base of his flashlight. 3 times. He waited. From below came 3 faint taps in return. She is alive, Rachel said. The words were barely louder than prayer. Ice.A repeated the signal, then called through the ice. Ava, move away from the sound if you can. We are going to open a way to you. A whisper returned, but the current distorted it. Ghost suddenly stepped away from the clear circle and followed a narrow line beneath the surface. The line curved toward a darker section of ice near the bend. Ice.A saw small bubbles moving below, one after another, like a trail of breath trapped beneath glass. She is not directly under us, he said. There is an airspace somewhere upstream. Claire ordered the rescue crew forward. They placed the ladder across the ice and began testing the area. Ghost ignored them. He moved to the edge of the dark section and stared down. The safety line tightened across his back. Ice.A reached for the harness. Wait, boy. Ghost looked at him once. Then the voice came again, clearer than before, carrying through a narrow crack hidden beneath the snow. Ghost, please hurry. The dog pulled hard enough to bring Ice.A one step forward. A thin fracture appeared beneath Ghost's paws. Water pressed upward, dark and silent. Claire shouted for everyone to move back. Ice.A wrapped both hands around the harness, but Ghost remained fixed on the opening. Beneath the ice, something pale passed through the current. It was a small hand, reaching toward the light before disappearing into darkness. The pale hand vanished beneath the current before anyone could reach it. Ghost lunged toward the fracture. Ice.A tightened his grip on the harness, but the white German shepherd twisted with sudden force, slipped free of the loosened buckle, and raced across the darkened ice. Ghost, stop! The command cracked through the storm. The dog did not slow. He reached the narrow opening just as the surface gave way beneath his front paws. For one suspended second, his white body seemed to hover over the black water. Then he disappeared. Ice.A dropped to his knees at the edge. Ghost! The river answered with silence. Snow blew across the opening, and the safety ropes scraped over the ice behind him. Claire ordered the rescue workers forward, but Ice.A heard none of it clearly. The cold, the wind, the floodlights, the voices on the bank, all of it fell away. He saw only another frozen surface from another winter. Caleb beneath the ice. 3 knocks. A small shadow moving under white glass. Ice.A remembered standing still while fear held every muscle in place. He remembered the sound stopping. He remembered carrying that silence into every year that followed. Beneath the opening, Ghost barked once. The sound rose through the water, muffled but unmistakable. It was not panic. It was a signal. Move. Ice.A pulled the rescue line across his chest and clipped it to the ring on his flotation suit. Dalton grabbed his shoulder. The opening is unstable. Ice.A looked at him. Then keep the line tight. Claire met his eyes from several feet away. She understood before he spoke. 2 people on the anchor, she called. No slack. Ice.A lowered himself onto the ladder. The ice groaned beneath his weight. He reached the edge and looked into the river. Nothing white showed in the darkness. Only bubbles moved beneath the surface, drifting upstream against the visible current. Ghost had found another flow below. Ice.A drew one breath. Then he entered. The cold struck like a wall, pressing against his face, chest, and hands all at once. His body wanted to rise. Training told him to control the breath, follow the line, trust the next movement. He opened his eyes beneath the water. The rescue light above became a pale circle blurred by ice. Ahead, Ghost's white coat appeared for an instant, then vanished behind the submerged frame of an old metal barrier. Ice.A followed. The current pulled at his legs, but the safety rope held firm. Ghost was not swimming toward the buried pickup. He was moving along the riverbed toward a concrete wall hidden beneath layers of ice and silt. A round opening had formed near its base, just wide enough for the dog to pass. It was the entrance to the old drainage channel Henry had mentioned. Ghost disappeared inside. Ice.A reached the opening and paused. The tunnel beyond was black, narrow, and moving with water. Behind him, the line tugged once. The team above was asking for a signal. Ice.A pulled twice to show he was still moving. Then he entered the tunnel. The concrete walls closed around him. His shoulder brushed one side, and the rope scraped against the other. Ahead, Ghost's paws disturbed small pockets of trapped air that shimmered silver in the beam of Ice.A's light. The dog stopped near a rusted grate bent away from the wall. He looked back, then slipped through the gap. Ice.A followed carefully. On the other side, the tunnel widened. The current weakened. Above them, the ceiling rose into darkness. Ghost surfaced first. Ice.A broke through a sheet of thin ice and drew air into his lungs. The space smelled of wet stone, rust, and earth sealed away for decades. A narrow pocket of air stretched above the water, no more than 3 feet high in places. Ghost stood on a concrete ledge, water streaming from his coat. He shook once, then turned toward the darkness. Ava, Ice.A called. His voice traveled down the tunnel and returned in broken echoes. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then a child answered. Here. The word came from farther inside. Ice.A climbed onto the ledge, keeping one hand on the rope. Ghost moved ahead, his nails clicking softly against the concrete. The tunnel curved left, beyond the reach of the rescue light. Ice.A followed the sound of the dog's breathing and the faintest whisper of a song. A girl was singing somewhere in the dark. The melody was slow and unsteady, but familiar. It was an old hymn Ice.A's mother used to sing when thunderstorms shook the windows. Ghost stopped at the end of the ledge. Ice.A raised the light. Ava Collins sat inside a shallow recess above the waterline, wrapped around a smaller figure. Her red cap was gone. Her face was pale with cold, but her eyes remained open. When she saw Ghost, relief moved through her so gently that it looked almost like sleep. "You came," she whispered. Ghost climbed beside her and pressed his body against her coat. Isaiah stepped closer. "Ava, I am Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks. Your mother is waiting for you." Ava shook her head and tightened her arms around the child beside her. It was a little boy, perhaps 6 years old, bundled in a blue jacket several sizes too large. His eyes were closed, but his breathing was steady. "You have to take him first," Ava said. Isaiah looked at the boy, then back at her. "Who is he?" Ava swallowed and listened to the water rising below the ledge. "His name is Eli Parker. He has been down here for 3 days." Isaiah lowered the rescue light until its beam rested on the little boy's face. Eli Parker looked younger than 6 in that narrow pocket of darkness. His cheeks were pale, his lips colorless, and one mitten was missing, but his breathing came in small, steady clouds against Ava's coat. Ghost pressed closer to both children, his wet white fur becoming a wall of warmth between them and the cold. "Concrete. 3 days?" Isaiah asked. Ava nodded. Her voice trembled, though she fought to keep it clear. "He told me his father's truck slid through the ice. He got out through the window, but the water carried him into this tunnel." Isaiah remembered the submerged pickup, the small boots, and the blue blanket recovered from the passenger seat. The pieces settled into place with a terrible quiet. "Where is Eli's father?" Ava looked down at the boy. "Eli does not know. He said his father pushed him toward the open window and told him to keep moving toward the light." She paused, listening to the water beneath the ledge. "There was no light when he got here." Isaiah touched 2 fingers to Eli's neck and felt a faint but regular pulse. The child needed warmth, dry air, and medical care, but the tunnel offered none of them. "How did you find him?" he asked. Ava looked at Ghost, as though the dog made the answer easier to tell. "I heard him during the festival. Everyone said it was the river making noise, but rivers do not ask for their mother." She had followed the sound from the church to the North Bend, using her cellular telephone to record it. Henry Wallace saw her near the bank and tried to stop her. Then the ice shifted beneath an old maintenance cover hidden by snow. Ava slipped into shallow water at the edge, and Henry pulled her back before the current could take her. That was when Eli called again from below. Henry tied a rope around a tree and entered the drainage opening through a broken section near the bank. He reached the ledge, found Eli, and brought Ava inside because the storm had sealed their way back before he could guide both children out. "Mr. Wallace stayed with us until morning," Ava said. "He gave Eli his coat. Then he said he would find another way and bring help." Isaiah understood the mud on Henry's knees, the wet shoulders, and the shame in the old medic's eyes. Henry had not abandoned them. He had crawled through darkness until the river forced him back, then returned to town carrying only Ava's mitten and the knowledge that 2 children were still beneath the ice. "He did come back," Isaiah said. "He brought us to you." Ava closed her eyes for a moment. "I knew he would." The safety rope around Isaiah's waist pulled twice. The rescue team was asking for his condition. He answered with 3 firm pulls, then one more, the signal for multiple survivors. Far beyond the concrete walls, the line tightened as the people above understood. Ghost lifted his head. A low rumble moved through the tunnel. It was not a growl. The water level had risen another inch and was flowing faster around the ledge. Isaiah aimed the light toward the passage behind him. The thin ice he had broken through was already shifting, narrowing the air pocket near the ceiling. "We cannot stay here," he said. Ava tightened her arms around Eli. "Take him first. I will take both of you. The tunnel is too small." Her eyes met his with a steadiness no 11-year-old should have needed. Mr. Wallace could barely move through it alone. Isaiah studied the route. She was right. He could guide only one child through the submerged opening at a time. The safety line could carry Eli back to the rescue hole if Isaiah secured him properly, but Ava would have to remain on the ledge until he returned. Ghost seemed to understand before the words were spoken. He climbed fully into the recess and lay beside Ava, placing his body between her and the rising water. "Ghost stays with you," Isaiah said. Ava rested one hand on the dog's neck. He already promised. Isaiah removed the secondary flotation strap from his suit and wrapped it around Eli's chest, checking it twice. The boy stirred. His eyes opened briefly, dark and confused. "Ava," he whispered. "I am right here," she answered. "You are going home first." Eli looked toward Ice.A. "Are you a soldier?" "I am a United States Marine." "Will you come back for her?" Ice.A. felt the question strike the oldest wound inside him. Once, long ago, another child had waited beneath ice for Ice.A. to move. That child had trusted him. This time, fear would not be the final answer. He placed one hand over Eli's small shoulder. Nobody gets left behind. A deep crack rolled through the tunnel. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The water surged over the edge and soaked Ava's boots. Ghost rose, bracing himself against her legs. Ice.A. lifted Eli carefully and stepped toward the black passage. Behind him, Ava began singing the old hymn again, her voice quiet but steady. Then Ghost barked once. Ice.A. turned. A section of concrete near the recess had shifted, and a new stream of water was pouring through the wall. The ledge would not hold until he returned. Ice.A. saw the new stream widen along the cracked concrete and understood that the ledge might vanish before he could make a second trip. He looked at Eli in his arms, then at Ava and Ghost behind him. The little boy was barely awake. Ava was shivering so hard that her voice broke between the notes of the hymn. There was no safe choice left, only the choice that might save the most time. Ice.A. lowered Eli onto the narrow ledge and pulled the rescue rope free from his own harness. He secured the line around the boy's flotation strap, checked every buckle, and gave 3 sharp pulls. Far beyond the tunnel, the team answered. "They are going to bring you out," Ice.A. told Eli. The boy's eyes opened. "Without you, I will be right behind you." Ava reached over and placed her red scarf around Eli's neck. "Hold on to this," she whispered. "It means you are not alone." Ice.A. guided Eli into the water and kept one hand beneath his shoulders while the rescue team slowly drew the rope through the passage. The boy disappeared into the narrow tunnel, carried by the line and the current toward the opening under the river. Ice.A. followed several feet, making sure the strap did not catch against the bent grate. When he felt the rope move smoothly, he pulled twice to signal the team to continue. Then he turned back. The sound behind him had changed. Water no longer trickled into the chamber. It rushed. Ice.A. climbed onto the ledge and found Ava pressed against the rear wall while Ghost stood in front of her, his white coat soaked and his paws planted wide. The water had reached the dog's chest. "Come on," Ice.A. said. "We move now." Ava tried to stand, but her legs folded beneath her. Ice.A. caught her before she fell into the current. Ghost stepped closer, supporting her with his shoulder. Another crack rolled. Through the concrete, a section of the ledge broke away and vanished beneath the dark water. Ice.A. pulled Ava against his chest and clipped the remaining strap around both of them. "Can you hold your breath?" he asked. She nodded, but fear had finally entered her eyes. "I do not know." "You do not have to know. You only have to trust me." Ava looked at Ghost. "What about him?" Ice.A. reached for the dog's harness and found the loose buckle that had allowed Ghost to escape on the river. He fastened it tightly and attached the short guide line to his wrist. "He stays with us." The tunnel groaned. The air pocket above them shrank as the water rose. Ice.A. lifted Ava into his arms. "When I say now, take one breath and keep your face against my shoulder." She wrapped both arms around his neck. Ghost moved to the edge, waiting. Ice.A. could feel the dog watching him. Not for permission, for direction. Now, they entered the water together. The cold closed over Ava first, then Ice.A. Ghost swam ahead, pulling gently against the guideline. Ice.A. kept one hand on the concrete wall and the other around Ava. The rescue light was gone. The tunnel had become complete darkness. He followed Ghost by touch, feeling each movement through the line around his wrist. Behind them, something heavy shifted and sent a wave through the passage. Ava's grip tightened. Ice.A. held her closer and moved forward. The bent grate appeared beneath his hand. He turned sideways, guided Ava through, then pushed after her. His shoulder caught for 1 second against the metal. The old fear returned instantly. Caleb beneath the ice. The sound stopping. The years of silence. Ghost pulled once. Ice.A. stopped fighting the memory and followed the dog. His shoulder slipped free. They entered the wider section of the tunnel. A pale glow appeared ahead. The rescue opening. The safety rope floated through the water like a silver thread. Ice.A. reached it and gave one hard pull. Hands above answered immediately. The line tightened around his chest. Ghost surfaced first, breaking through the dark opening with a sharp breath. Ice.A rose beneath Ava and lifted her toward the light. Rescue workers reached down and drew her onto the ladder. Rachel's voice carried across the river, crying her daughter's name. Ice.A remained in the water until he saw Ava move, until he heard her whisper that Ghost was still below. Then the dog surfaced beside him, white fur darkened by river water, amber eyes bright beneath the floodlights. Ice.A wrapped one arm around Ghost's chest, and the team pulled them both from the opening. For several seconds, no one spoke. Snow fell across the ice. Eli lay wrapped in blankets near the rescue truck, breathing beneath an oxygen mask. Ava was carried toward him, still clutching the end of her red scarf. When Eli saw her, he lifted one hand. Ava reached back. Their fingers touched between the blankets. Henry Wallace stood at the edge of the crowd, trembling from cold and relief. Claire walked to him and placed Ava's red mitten in his palm. "You brought us to them," she said. Henry closed his fingers around it and lowered his head. Ghost stepped away from Ice.A and crossed the snow toward Ava. The girl reached down from the stretcher and rested her hand against his wet face. "I knew you would hear me," she whispered. Ice.A watched them beneath the falling snow, but before relief could settle over the river, Claire's radio crackled with a new report. Search crews had found another set of tracks near the North Bend. Adult tracks. They led onto the ice and did not return. Claire turned toward the North Bend as the radio repeated the message. Adult tracks. One person. No return path. Ice.A looked at Eli beneath the blankets and understood before anyone said the words. "His father," he said. Ghost lifted his head. Exhaustion weighed on the dog's body, but his ears turned toward the river. Claire ordered a second team upstream, while paramedics moved Ava and Eli into the heated rescue truck. Rachel climbed inside with them, holding her daughter's hand and Eli's mittened fingers at the same time. Henry Wallace remained near the bank, staring through the snow. "The truck went through near the old landing," he said. "If the father escaped, he may have followed the drainage line from above." Ice.A knelt beside Ghost and checked the dog's paws, chest, and breathing. "You have done enough." Ghost looked past him toward the North Bend. The amber eyes gave the same answer they had given all night. Someone was still missing. Ice.A wrapped a thermal blanket around the dog's shoulders and followed Claire along the shoreline. The adult tracks began near a broken section of reeds and continued onto the ice. They were uneven, separated by long spaces, as if the person who made them had struggled to remain upright. 40 yards from shore, the prints turned toward a cluster of old maintenance markers. Then they vanished beneath fresh snow. Ghost moved slowly now, nose close to the surface. He stopped beside a metal pipe rising several inches above the ice. A faint warmth touched the air around it, barely enough to melt a thin ring in the snow. Ice.A placed his ear near the pipe. At first, he heard only water moving far below. Then came a breath. "There is someone under us." The rescue team cleared the snow and found an access hatch buried beneath it. The hinges resisted until Henry arrived with a maintenance key he had kept from his years as a county medic. The hatch opened into a narrow utility chamber beside the drainage tunnel. Inside, curled beneath an old emergency tarp, was a man in a brown work coat. His name was Daniel Parker. He was weak from cold, but alive. When the paramedics lifted him into the snow, his first word was not his own name. "Eli." Claire leaned close. "Your son is safe." Daniel closed his eyes. The breath that left him sounded like 3 days of fear finally releasing its hold. At the rescue truck, Eli saw his father through the open doors. The boy tried to sit up, but Rachel gently kept the blanket around him. Daniel was carried close enough for their hands to meet. "You kept moving toward the light," he whispered. Eli shook his head. There was no light. He looked at Ava. She came instead. Ava lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the attention. Ghost stood beside the truck, covered in blankets, his white face resting against Ice.A's knee. Eli reached toward him. "And he heard us." Henry Wallace watched from several feet away. For the first time that night, no suspicion followed the old man. Claire returned Ava's recorder and red mitten to him. "Keep these until she asks for them," she said. Henry nodded, unable to speak. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The river remained pale and still beneath a clear Wisconsin sky, but the town around it had changed. People who had once crossed the street to avoid Henry brought firewood to his porch. Volunteers repaired his telephone line, replaced the broken boards on his cabin, and filled the empty shelves in his kitchen. Daniel Parker spent several days recovering at the county hospital. Eli stayed in the room beside him, and Ava visited every afternoon with drawings of rivers, tunnels, and a white dog surrounded by golden light. 3 months later, spring returned to Eagle River. The ice broke into quiet pieces and drifted downstream beneath open sunlight. Ice.A stood at the north bend with Ghost beside him. The dog's coat had dried to its familiar white, bright against the dark earth and new grass. Ava approached carrying the red mitten. She had sewn a small blue star onto the wrist. "For Ghost," she said. Ice.A tied it gently to the dog's harness. Ava knelt and pressed her forehead against his. "I called because Mr. Wallace told me his name from the tunnel," she explained. "But I think I knew him before that." Ice.A remembered the drawing in Henry's cabin, the white dog on the Blue River, made days before Ghost arrived in town. He did not try to explain it. Some truths became smaller when forced into words. After Ava left, Ice.A reached beneath his coat and removed an old silver whistle. It had belonged to Caleb. He had carried it through training, deployments, funerals, and every winter he had spent pretending the past no longer followed him. He held it over the moving water, then opened his hand. The whistle touched the river and disappeared without a sound. Ghost leaned against his leg. Ice.A rested one hand on the dog's head. The river continued beneath them, no longer a sealed place of darkness, but water moving towards somewhere new. Perhaps Ghost had followed a voice. Perhaps he had followed a scent, a vibration, or something no instrument could measure. Ice.A no longer needed to decide. He only knew that 2 children had called from beneath the cold. One man had finally answered, and a white dog had shown him where mercy was waiting.